how have Dems responded to both of these bills? They are similarly divide and conquer tactics, focusing on a population that they say is problematic and saying, give the state more power to go after this population. And the question when this kind of tactic comes up for MAGA is, how did Dems respond? So they responded very differently, which I think gives us a lesson. On the immigration bill, on the immigration bill, Dems after the election were fearful that they were vulnerable on immigration, and they were really eager to show that they could be tough on immigration. So a lot of Dems signed on to this Laken Riley bill, this anti-immigrant bill. 48 Democrats in the House voted for it, 48 Democrats, and immediately afterwards, a lot of Senate Dems started coming out in support. That built momentum. Momentum is real in Congress. Once things start picking up speed, picking up momentum, suddenly it's going faster and faster and faster. And as a result of that, the Senate GOP saw that the Dems were weak on this, saw that they weren't going to put up a fight, and they fast-tracked that legislation. All but 10 Senate Democrats ended up voting to overcome the filibuster on this. Then it went through an amendment process where Dems promised they were going to fight for amendments. The Republicans killed any amendments to make the bill better. And now there's going to be another vote in the Senate, and it seems pretty likely that there are going to be 7 Dems necessary to overcome the filibuster again. That seems likely where we're headed on it. And that's because where Dems started was they started with a bad bill, and they said, hey, we want to show that we're reasonable, we're going to sign on to it. And that led to something that should never have even been considered for federal law being fast-tracked, and is likely to be one of the first bills Donald Trump signs into law. On the other end, we've got this anti-trans kids bill that was moving forward this week. And Dems, they did something brilliant. I was talking to I won't name them, but some current House members who were part of this effort. They labeled this anti-trans kids bill the Child Predator Empowerment Act, and they criticized Republicans for targeting children. And almost in lockstep, the Democrats in the House opposed this bill. There were only 2 Dems that voted for it. Cuellar in Texas, and who was it? Gonzalez in Texas. There were just a couple Dems, but almost the entirety of the Dem caucus voted against it. There was no chorus of Senate Dems then coming out in support. It passed the House. It passed the House with Republican votes, but not with Democratic and bipartisan support. And as a result of that, it means it's nowhere on the Senate calendar. It's not being fast-tracked. There's a good chance it's dead in the water, that it's not going to move forward. And that's because Dems stood united in the House. They slowed the momentum. And I was talking with a member last night, and he said, he was talking about a caucus meeting of all the Democrats in the House, and he was talking about how energized the caucus felt because they had unified and they said no to these MAGA attacks on trans kids, and they were excited about finding other opportunities to do that. So there are 2 lessons. I'm going to get to Q&A now, but there are 2 lessons I think from these 2 fights. One is that yes, Dems can indeed unify in opposition to these divide and conquer strategies. They might not be able to stop it. Look, we didn't stop the anti-trans bill in the House, but what we did was we slowed it down. And what we know about the MAGA's deeply unpopular agenda is that when you slow it down, when you make it just sit there out in the open, it starts to get pretty moldy. There are these analyses that come out showing how bad the policy is. The public attention turns to the policy, and people are saying, why are you doing this? The MAGAs, they want to move fast right now. That's their goal. We've got to use our power to slow it down, that it actually has an impact on actual policy. But then the second big lesson, and you can't undercount how important this is. Courage is contagious. Courage is contagious. That's true outside Capitol Hill, but it's true on Capitol Hill as well. When members of Congress on our side unify successfully and say no and stake out a position, it makes them feel good and they want to do it again. So an excellent action you can take right now, it's in your control. If you have a Democratic House member that isn't one of the 2 who voted for it, so the vast majority of Democratic House members, call them up and say, hey, I saw what you did on this anti-trans bill. Good job. Keep on doing that. Please stand up against these MAGA attacks. We've got your back. You've got to give them positive reinforcement when they take an action like that so that they are more likely to take future actions like that.